I did want to ask you something, because it's something we have talked about before, and you've talked many times about, and that's the state or otherwise of the Tory Party in relation to our broader culture. The reason I mention this is there's an article by Ed West that's gone up today, just before we're recording this, and it's on Substack, "What Should Small Conservatives Believe?" And it goes on to say, Peter Hitchens was right all along. The Tory Party needs to die. He says there comes a stage in a man's life when he puts aside childish beliefs and comes to realise that Peter Hitchens was right all along. I'm sure that doesn't give you any particular satisfaction, Peter, but...
well, the stage tends to be, or appears to be, roughly a few weeks before they reach their deathbeds. It's a very, very long process that people seem to have to go through before they reach the stage of recognising that I'm right. I have been arguing this for nearly 20 years now. And it's been, I remember in the years just before the 2010 election, when David Cameron had become leader of the Conservative Party, I thought it was the most urgent thing in my life that I should persuade people that whatever they did at the 2010 election, they should not endorse David Cameron's Blairite takeover of the Labour Party and its conversion into a Blairite formation, which was what I believed then and believe now was going on. And also I thought there was no disadvantage for the British people if they didn't have a Cameron government. Even if they continued to have a Brown government, it wouldn't have been any worse. But it was an extraordinary stage in our politics where you couldn't sack the government. You get the same government however you voted in 2010, but you could sack the opposition. If you did so, then it wouldn't magically necessarily follow that you would get a new political party, but it would create the opportunity for it. In our first past the post system, which I have to say I very strongly support, one of the parties at least has to be badly wounded before another party can arise, and that was what I was hoping for out of the 2010 election. I could not get anybody to support me. I went round other columnists, I won't name any names, begging people who I thought might see the point to support me in this, because I was a lone voice. I remember Intelligence Squared ran a debate very kindly and generously in which I was going to put this case, and Michael Gove, to his credit, was prepared to speak against me. And what actually happened was that my partner on my side of the debate pulled out at the last minute. I won't say who it was, because he's no longer with us, but I regard it as one of the most disgraceful things anyone's ever done to me. And I was left with someone having to partner me who was just doing it as a professional debater, because we had to have it. I could not get any support for a position which I now find week by week more and more people come to see was right. And also I remember a meeting of the Bruges group at the Tory Party conference, I think of autumn 2009 in Manchester, where I spoke on the same theme, and the temperature of the room dropped while I was speaking, because nobody wanted to hear what I had to say at the time. And there was a huge, ridiculous belief that David Cameron, despite the obvious fact that he was in fact a Metropolitan Liberal public relations man, that he was actually going to be a Conservative Prime Minister, and they would not be shaken from it. Tribal loyalty trumped thought. And so there we are. So whenever anybody says, well, it's wonderful to see that people now realise that you're right, I say, well, it isn't actually. It's far too late. There was an opportunity, a real opportunity in 2010. I think there was still enough intellectual and political muscle in the country to create a genuinely sensible Conservative formation to replace the ruins of the Tory Party. But I think that time has gone now, and I very much fear that if the Tory Party now collapses, as it well may, it will be replaced by something pretty ropey.
Because of the lack of intellectual...
Yeah, this isn't any. No one's been thinking about it. The level of our education has been declining. The actual people available in our society to sustain it have been going into retirement or dying. I don't think there is the intellectual force and mind left in the country to create the sort of formation which could do the job properly, which would be as concerned about liberty and justice and law as it was about patriotism and about the welfare of the people. Huge issues on which a proper Conservative Party needs to be right to both to succeed and to do its duty.
You know, you said that there was a dip in the temperature when you talked about it back then.
Yeah.
You recently spoke, was it the Oxford Union, sorry, or it was one of the Roger Scruton?
It was one of the Roger Scruton lectures, yeah.
And you did talk about it then, didn't you?
Oh, I did, yes, but in a sort of elegiac way.
Yes.
Very much as a cause which had been lost to the detriment of the country, and and our culture.
I noticed with that, I watched the interview afterwards as well with Daniel.
Oh yes, and it was pitiful.
Yeah.
I'm afraid Daniel Hannan revealed himself that it was like being interviewed by Owen Jones.
Yes.
Only less entertaining.
Yes.
It's extraordinary, and people think of people such as Daniel Hannan, who doubtless is a perfectly nice person and kind to animals, but they think of him as some sort of conservative. He's plainly not remotely conservative on any actual important issue, but a liberal of some kind, as so many people are now trading under a conservative banner are. It's worth watching the thing, to watch the Hannan interview afterwards, to see how somebody can sit through an event of that kind and not have a clue about what's just been said.
Yes, he seemed just sort of irritated. That was
he was, yes. But I've had the same questioning about when the questioning began. I realised that he was basically taking the view that what I had been saying for the past 20 odd years is that the country was materially worse off. And my whole point has been that we're morally worse off, and if you're morally worse off, actually in the end you will be materially worse off as well, as we are now discovering. Our moral failures are, I think, one of the main reasons for our rapid impoverishment.
Yes.
But it's never been a question about child mortality rates or things of that kind which he raised. It's always been a question about moral poverty, and he simply hadn't grasped that. And here's the thing: I bumped into him on the train on the way up, and offered him a copy of the lecture, and he turned down the offer. So
really, I think I would completely agree with you there. I think there is this sort of, as you say, this emphasis on the material. It's like when I read every year, it's a similar kind of editorial they do in The Spectator about how everyone is so much better off, and you sort of think, well, in that case, why are people so unhappy?
Well, happiness is a very hard thing to pursue, as the Americans have found. But yes, but then again, if you say that child mortality has fallen, which it has done for many reasons, and could equally well, in my view, have fallen under a properly conservative form of government, what you must also mention then is the huge rise in the number of children who are aborted in the womb. If you're worried about child mortality, then that presumably must concern you. And it is a point at which moral poverty crosses with material progress.
200,000.
I think it's something like that now. We haven't reached the stage that the Soviet Union reached, where the number of abortions outnumbered live births, but it's pretty bad. And also the figures are now disguised by the fact that the use of the morning after pill is preventing many pregnancies from reaching the point at which they can be aborted in the first place. But it is undoubtedly the same thing. It's the destruction of human life in the womb for the convenience of adults.
Just before we go on to,
but we don't want to discuss that.
Just before we go on to
it's another interview.
Before we go into the book, I just want to pick up something that you said that you were a great supporter of first past the post.
Yes.
So, because when we have these endless discussions about what happens next, as you tend to do in these waters around here, people say, the only chance is for some form of proportional representation.
It's a bizarre thing to say. Every proportional representation system I've ever seen produces an arrangement whereby there are a number of small parties which coalesce after the election, often in ways they haven't warned anybody of beforehand, and that those parties are dominated by parties of the liberal left, or the Christian Democrat region, which is pretty much indistinguishable from the liberal left. You might get a so-called right-wing party taking part in one of these coalitions and getting a few ministerial posts in it, but it won't run it. The whole thing about first past the post is it forms coalitions before elections, and it's perfectly possible for an intelligent conservatism to produce a coalition. And I'm still amazed that in this country there has never been a goalist party, which is that's to say strongly social democratic on welfare and public services, and strongly patriotic abroad. And generally culturally conservative and morally conservative in its nature. I believe such a party, if it existed, would sweep the board. But in a proportional representation system, it wouldn't, because its elements would be divided up. And that's what they all. It can take sometimes I think more than a year in Belgium it's taken them to form coalitions out of their multi-parties. I don't know. The only thing that would appeal to it for a supposedly right-wing party would be that such a party would, of course, get state aid and would be able to build offices and employ people, and also its leaders, because of closed-list systems, would be guaranteed permanent political careers. But that's a concern for them. It's not a concern for the country. You would never get. I think only once in Germany since the war has there been a majority. I think Adenauer got an actual parliamentary majority in the Bundestag. Every other German government has been a coalition of one kind or another. You would never get the ability to throw out an unpopular government, which to me is vital for political stability. And you would never get a chance in between elections for strong government either. It would always be a salad. And it's amazing how so many people on the right seem to have fallen for PR. It's going to make it very difficult for them to resist when Keir Starmer does what I think he will do if he wins or becomes the largest single party at the next election, which is to go for it.
Well, actually, yes. So basically, what would happen if we have first past the post? We don't have any PR and all of that. Essentially, the Tory Party, you say it's too late. Come the next election, what are we going to have? What do you see happening?
If the Tory Party collapsed, then you would obviously have a period between its collapse and the creation of something else. And that's another reason why it should have happened a long time ago. You can't immediately create it. But as I say, I would have striven very hard for the creation of a British Gaullist party of the sort I just described. And I think that there is, you look at people like the existing Social Democratic Party, it's very appealing in many ways and has a lot of those elements to it. At the moment, it's a train set rather than a railway, because it's so small and has no money and very little broadcasting access. But if the Conservative Party were gone and there was a space, a party of that kind might well fill it.
Yes, I mean it is. I've spoken at the conference quite recently, and
lots of people have. I'd say they say some intelligent things, and they've understood an important fact. It is not necessary for Conservatives to be unpleasant to poor people. On the contrary, conservatism appeals to many people on the old-fashioned left. The old really pre-Wilson Labour Party was an extremely socially conservative party.